So we've been going over lesson plans, and most of you are already turned in your first lesson plan. However, I had some concerns and I wanted to address them in a way that you can see it as part of a technology format, which you guys are going to be required to address later on in PACTE. So I have the PowerPoint set up within a web-based program called Screencast-O-Matic. You guys can use this or others. There's lots of different programs that you can use to make your recordings more interactive. And you can use this when you're doing lecture or as remediation or different things. So let's focus back on our lesson plans in PACTE style. So our first thing we need to address for our lesson plans are objectives. Your objective should contain the ABCDs that Dr. Williamson spoke about last week. You should have your audience, which would be your students, the behavior, which is your verbs that he gave you, those lists, your condition, and your degree. You seem to be missing the degree, which is how you measure those things. So you need to make sure that your objectives are not activities. So they must not reference them in any way, shape, or form. An objective should be able to be shown mastery of through any different activity that contains those verbs. So we want to use activities to move the student towards mastery of the objective, not vice versa. So I have an example there at the bottom. Students will be able to identify all scientific stages of the butterfly with 100% accuracy. You don't have to necessarily have 100% accuracy depending on what you are wanting as their end goal. So if you are deciding on the low capacity for a foundation, that's really important to be very specific. However, if you're talking about the degree of something that's more artistic, you don't need to have 100% accuracy because 80% is just fine based on industry standards. That's okay. So you need to think about, always roll back to what is the industry standard. So within standards, you need to include both the number that's referenced in your list of standards for the state, or if you're in Gwinnett, your AKS, and the text of that standard so that I know that you're addressing the correct standard and the correct information and that it ties together. So if you look at your rubric for for your lesson plan, that's going to have to tie in smoothly and seamlessly with your curriculum and standard together. Prior knowledge. Students may not know everything there is to know, especially at the very beginning of the year, about your specific content, but they might know something that relates to it. Like they may not know all about engineering, but they might know how to use a tape measure. So think about those things when you're filling out your prior knowledge, especially because we're getting high schoolers. They're going to have a lot of knowledge just based on life experience. I know they don't have a lot of life experience, but it is life experience up to a point. Grouping. Some of you had indicated that you're going to give your students discretion as to what grouping you're going to do, and I do not recommend that. Almost always you're going to end up having to group them yourselves anyways, so it just alleviates a lot of headaches later on if you always decide on student groups. So I gave you a list of a couple different grouping strategies. You can go high-low, so like high-achieving students and low-achieving students, or low ability and high ability. You can do a random with rotation, and then you can filter those through your own views on what would work best for those students. So it might be random, but not entirely random, and it's going to rotate. You could have same or different skill levels combined. So if someone is very good at public speaking, but the other ones aren't. They have other tools. You can mix those students together so that everyone uses their strength, just like in industry. We want to group for classroom management. You might have some students, when they're together, they cause a major problem and they're a big behavior issue and they disrupt class, but if you separate them out and put them in different corners of the room with different groups, they might be able to focus, and that's good for them and the rest of the class and your sanity. You may do an interest survey, or you may just know later on in the year what students are more interested in, and so you can group students based on interest as well, or you can base them on a response. You can have specific questions that they answer, and then you can group them based on that. So you could do like based on their correct answers, and you can mix those students that got correct and incorrect and help them learn together with peers. Or you can do it based on almost like interests, so that reverts back up to that bullet point above. So far, you guys haven't gotten any formal training from us or Dr. Williamson on SPED students, but we're going to be requiring a lot more detail later on once you've gotten that training. However, you do need to know that legally you are required to follow IEPs, which is their individual plan for those students. So if it says extended time on all activities, as long as they're trying, you are legally required to give them extra time on assignments and tests. So think about that. There's lots of different things that might be within the IEP. You need to have access to it and review it. If you have your student lists during pre-planning, I highly recommend you get those together, and any health concerns as well. So I have just an example on materials that might be seen. I did this just for a basic science classroom for a dissection day where the teacher would do a demo dissection of a butterfly, and that person's going to be using a YouTube video. I included the link for that. There's the actual specimen for the demo, the projector, the microscope, the tray, the pins. There's also the rubrics and how many that teacher is going to need to evaluate the students for all day, so they know when they pick up that lesson plan that they planned the year before, they know exactly how many rubrics they're going to need, however many students they have. Parts of an insect diagram, which then the student can use later on to create their lab report. And then you have student materials, so they're going to have their notebook, pencil, colored pencils to fill in their parts of an insect diagram, a microscope per group, specimens for the whole day, and a wax dissection tray they're going to use, and the pins. So this is just an example, but you need to think of everything that you're going to touch as the teacher for the instructional materials, and then everything that the student is going to touch. And you can even go so far as, like, because they're doing this section, they're going to have to sanitize everything afterwards, so you may need to include sanitizer materials. So our lesson, this is just a little overview of things that either people were asking me about or that I saw as possible issues later on from the lesson plans that I graded. So you want to include your time allocated for each activity and transition. So for each time you move on to a new activity, or each time you need to have a transition between those activities, you need to tell me how much time you're going to allocate for each thing. So make sure that your transitions shouldn't last any more than a minute, maximum 2 minutes if it's a major transition from one large activity to another. You want to give details for what you, the teacher, are going to do along the way and what your students are expected to do, even during those inductions and closure portions. We're going to go into more detail in a moment about induction and closure and what those really are. So this is where the meat of the content should be located, is within the lesson itself. And then all your background information is in those other boxes in that lesson template. So here I have a couple induction suggestions. These are just ones that I've used throughout the course of my teaching years, and then some just random ones. There's tons of ones online. You can talk to your other PACTE peers, other teachers, think about what teachers had done in the past when you were in class. So I have little silly ones, that kind of grab their attention, and that's part of what an induction should be, is to grab their attention and also keep them busy while you are handling those administrative duties. So in your lesson, you need to describe what you're doing while they're completing the induction activity. So we have Monday mistakes. Find the mistake in the following. So then you would include like either a math problem, maybe if you're doing like engineering or culinary arts or facts, or you have a picture of a marketing something and they have to find what the mistake is. Maybe it's going after the wrong demographic and they need to explain it. Tuesday terms, they need to put a term into their own words. Wednesday wise words, so you can give a quote, ask them if they agree and how does it relate to them. Thursday thoughts, so you can have a short video clip with questions that they answer. And all these things can go either into a little slip of paper that they turn in as a ticket out the door, or it could be part of a notebook that they use all year long and you do random checks on these. So there's a couple of other ones you can look at that I have listed. Ethical dilemmas, we are training them to be in industry, and there's always going to be an ethical dilemma no matter what industry you're in. And these are very important to include in your lessons because they're going to come into contact with these ethical dilemmas, and we need to give them the wherewithal to be able to handle them and think through what they're doing before they cause damage to themselves or others. And you can have something as simple as a picture and ask them what's going on in this picture. It could be related to a safety thing or really anything having to do with your content. So a transition should be a very short thing that either gives a stimulus in some way, so you need to interact with them visually, with a sound, with anything that will get their attention and train them, just like Pavlov's dog, that we don't want them to drool, but we do want them to react in a positive manner. So you can use a chime electronically or on your phone, your computer, a little button. You can use a bell, go old school. You can count down with them, and they know by the time that you hit 0 that they need to be moving on to the next activity. You can have them repeat what you say. In elementary school, they use this a lot, or they use a rhyme where the teacher starts it and then they finish it. You can flick the lights. You can use a timer. You want things that are going to be a stimulus to them, that are going to make them think about what they should be doing next. And with this, you want to also try and include a verbal indicator of what they should be doing, and also written. I always like to tell them what to do and show them what to do as well. So here we have our content. This is where the meat of your information must go and all of the details. The content should include a transition between the induction and the actual content. So there at the top you can see in my example that I have a transition using a timer with a chime, and I'm also going to be using a verbal and written instruction listed on the screen to also give them a visual and a sound in my voice to indicate that we need to transition from one thing to another. If you note, I also have a time limit set of 1 minute during this first transition. It's going to take them a little bit more time, but I wouldn't ever recommend going beyond a minute. So then I have a KWL chart that I'm using. I'm talking about what the teacher is going to be saying specifically to the students. I have another time limit set of 6 minutes, and then I have other things that I'm using throughout this lesson. And this isn't even the whole lesson. I have more details down further about guided practice, interactive modeling, another 10 minutes. But you can see every time in between each activity where they're going to have to either change gears in some way, go to teacher-centered to student-centered, maybe to electronics. We have a transition in between those items to help refocus them on what they need to be doing next. So you can read through that really quick if you want to, and pause the video if you want to read the details, but I wanted to give you the level of detail that we're expecting in your content. For closures, I have lots of different examples for you. We have something as simple as a tweet. You can put it on a sticky note, have the students post it on your Twitter board. You can use an exit ticket where they have one for every day that's already printed for them. I have some examples there on the screen for you. There's ones that look like a text message chat between yourself or maybe a different character that you're having them talk about, someone from history. You have a Wordle that you might have created, you put up on the screen, and they try and find all the words in there and give a description or talk to their elbow partner about. Snowstorm is where you have a student write down 2 facts and a lie, and they throw it to somebody else in the classroom, and that student has to figure out what the truths are and what the lie is and turn it in. So those are more student-centered. You don't have to create that content. They create it themselves, and they have a lot of fun throwing papers at each other. Gallery walk is awesome if you've just finished up a huge project and you want them to look at each other's projects. You can use that as a reflective piece, and the closure really is just a way for them to reflect on what they've learned and to process it, because a lot of times, especially with the older kids, but even with the younger ones, we don't give them enough time to process the information they've gotten before they're told to either move on to something brand new or to apply it right away, and they have a lot of trouble because they haven't even figured out what they just learned. So all these items are great. I'd recommend any one of them. There's a ton more you can research online or talk to your PACTE peers, but understand that the closure is not as a housekeeping item, but it's a time for the students to reflect on what they've learned and process that information. Assessments. In the assessment section of your lesson plan template, we want to have the type of assessment and the title. No other details are needed right there, because later on you're going to actually include the assessment itself with your lesson plans. And you'll include formative, so classwork, practice, those daily things, and the summative, the test projects, the big grades as well. So here I have an example one for you. There's lots of details in here. I've included that whole section on assessments that's on the template. I gave you an example with my butterflies and caterpillars, so you can read through that, pause the video if you want to, and read that in detail. So any additional questions or concerns, please feel free to email or text me before Tuesday. If you have anything specific that you need help with, I'll be happy to help you. Have a great weekend.